All right, so buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving headfirst into some serious political drama.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
We're talking South Korea, we're talking martial law, we're talking
All in
impeachment.
the span of, like, what, 2 weeks?
Less than that.
Wild.
So, December 3rd, President Yoon Suk Yeol drops this bombshell and declares martial law.
Out of nowhere.
Then, just 6 hours later, poof, it's gone.
Like it never happened.
But the damage was done.
Oh, absolutely.
Fast forward to December 14th, and boom, impeachment.
Just like that.
We've got articles, legal analyses, even some whispers from folks in the know, and we're going to break it all down.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So let's start with the basics. Martial law.
Right.
Not exactly an everyday occurrence.
Definitely not something you see very often, especially not for such a short time.
Exactly. I mean, 6 hours. It's almost like he just wanted to send a message.
Well, that's what's so strange about it. Like,
Yeah.
martial law, that's the nuclear option.
Yeah, you only pull that trigger when things are really hitting the fan.
War, total societal breakdown, that kind of stuff.
Right. It basically hands the keys over to the military.
Yeah, curfews, restrictions on gatherings, even media censorship. It's a whole different ballgame.
So to even think about invoking that, even for a few hours, it's a huge gamble.
Massive.
So what was Yoon thinking?
Well, he and his camp, they're spinning it as a necessary alarm bell.
Alarm bell.
Yeah, like a wake-up call.
Okay.
They claim the opposition parties were getting way out of line,
Like how?
threatening the stability of the nation, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And his ex-defense minister, Kim Yong-han, he's backing him up on this.
Kim Young.
Yeah, you know the one who just got arrested?
Right, right.
Well, his lawyers actually said the goal was to eradicate anti-state elements.
Whoa! Eradicate. That's some strong language.
Yeah, and that's exactly why this whole thing blew up in Yoon's face.
I mean, who gets to decide what's anti-state?
Exactly. It's totally subjective, wide open to abuse.
No wonder there was such a backlash.
Oh, yeah, protests in the streets, opposition parties going ballistic.
And then wham! Impeachment!
It all happened so fast.
So now Yoon's powers are suspended while he waits for the Constitutional Court to make a decision.
Right.
Big fall from grace.
It is.
But it's not a done deal, right?
Well, the court could still reinstate him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But even if that happens, his reputation has taken a major hit.
Governing's going to be an uphill battle no matter what.
For sure.
Speaking of uphill battles, we can't forget about Kim Yong-hyun.
Oh, yeah, he's a whole other can of worms.
Arrested for insurrection, then he tries to take his own life while he's in detention.
It's like something out of a movie.
Seriously.
And his case, it's going to set a precedent for how the courts handle all these accusations tied to the martial law thing.
If he's found guilty.
Could spell big trouble for Yoon.
And Yoon himself isn't exactly helping his case.
What do you mean?
He's refusing to cooperate with the investigation, ignoring summons, not even submitting legal briefs to the court.
Oh, wow, he's really digging in his heels.
Playing hardball or just playing stupid. I don't know.
It's definitely risky. Makes him look like he's above the law.
Which could totally backfire during the trial.
Big time.
So we've got a defiant president who's been impeached, an ex-defense minister facing some serious charges, and a whole nation holding its breath.
It's a mess.
Total mess. Where do we even go from here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. But before we get into all the potential outcomes, we need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
You're right. There's a whole lot of history here that we can't ignore.
Exactly. This isn't just some isolated incident.
This runs deep.
Very deep.
And that's where things get really interesting.
South Korea's history with democracy, it's been, well, let's just say it's been a bumpy ride.
Yeah, definitely not a straight line to freedom and all that.
I mean, you've had periods of military rule, protests, transitions. It's been a real struggle.
And it feels like this whole martial law thing, it just ripped open some old wounds, you know?
Exactly, like a scar that never quite healed.
Yeah, it exposed all these underlying tensions that are still simmering beneath the surface.
You have to remember that for a lot of South Koreans, the memories of authoritarian rule are still very, very fresh.
Like it was yesterday.
So any whiff of a power grab triggers this visceral reaction.
It's like a collective trauma almost.
Yeah, and it's not just anxiety either.
What else is there?
Anger, confusion, a sense of betrayal even.
Betrayal? Why betrayal?
Well, think about it, Yunin. He was elected on this whole platform of reform and transparency.
Right. The fresh face, the new hope.
Exactly. And then, bam, he pulls this martial law stunt.
It feels like a total contradiction.
A huge one. And it's created this massive rift in society.
So you've got Yoon supporters saying he's a strong leader who's not afraid to take decisive action.
Right. The He's doing what needs to be done, crowd.
And then you've got his opponents painting him as this wannabe dictator.
A wolf in sheep's clothing.
It's crazy how this one event has become this Rorschach test.
Oh, totally.
Yep.
It's revealing people's deepest fears and beliefs about power.
And about authority.
And it's also highlighting just how fragile democratic institutions can be.
Right. If a president can just declare martial law like that,
Yeah.
even for a few hours.
Let's stop it from happening again.
Exactly. And with even less justification next time.
That's the big question, isn't it? This whole situation, it's like a stress test for South Korea's democracy.
Will it pass?
We'll see. I mean, will their system of checks and balances hold up? Or will this episode embolden future leaders to push the boundaries even further?
It's a scary thought.
It is. And the Constitutional Court, their decision on the impeachment, that's going to be a major turning point.
Yeah, if they uphold it, Yoon's out for good.
New elections probably within 60 days.
A whole new political landscape.
Could happen overnight.
But what if they overturn the impeachment? What then?
Well, Yoon could try to limp back into power, but his legitimacy's shattered.
Yeah. How do you govern a nation when half the population thinks you're a tyrant?
It's almost impossible.
So either way, South Korea's in for a bumpy ride.
Oh, yeah, a major one. And it's not just about who's sitting in the presidential office either.
It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. This whole episode has exposed these deep societal fissures.
Like what?
The debate over executive power, the limits of free speech. How do you even define what is a threat to national security?
Those are some tough questions.
Yeah, and those are questions that are going to be debated long after this whole thing blows over.
It's like this martial law declaration. It was like throwing a match on a pile of dry tinder.
And that fire is going to burn for a while.
So while this deep dive started with a focus on South Korean politics,
Right.
the implications, they go way beyond that.
Global even.
It's a reminder that democracy is this constant work in progress.
And it requires vigilance and active participation from all of us.
If we want to keep it, we have to fight for it.
Every single day. And for me, there's one key takeaway that really stands out.
What's that?
This whole situation with the martial law thing. It's a perfect example of how quickly things can escalate when power goes unchecked.
Absolutely. It's like a cautionary tale.
Right out of a history book.
It's reminding us to stay informed, to hold our leaders accountable, and to never, ever take our democratic freedoms for granted.
Because once they're gone, they're not easy to get back.
So we've covered the history, the immediate fallout, the global implications.
The whole 9 yards.
But the big question remains, what happens next? What are the potential paths forward for South Korea?
All right, so South Korea is at a crossroads.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here in terms of what could happen?
Well, it all comes down to the Constitutional Court. They're the ones who are going to decide Yoon's fate with this whole impeachment thing.
So if they side with the lawmakers,
Yoon's out, permanently, done, finished, kaput.
and then what?
New elections, probably within 60 days.
So a whole new political landscape could pop up in just a couple months.
It'd be a complete shakeup.
Wow.
But let's say the court goes the other way and they decide to reinstate Yoon.
Okay.
He technically gets his job back, but
There's got to be a but. His authority is shot. I mean, he'd be leading a country where the legislature doesn't trust him, half the population sees him as a dictator, and there's this whole martial law thing hanging over his head.
could he even function as president at that point?
It'd be a nightmare.
Hmm.
Every decision would be met with resistance. Every policy would be scrutinized for any hint of authoritarianism.
Sounds like a recipe for gridlock.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So yet, no matter what happens, South Korea's in for a period of serious political instability.
It's like they're walking a tightrope.
And it's not just about who's in charge either.
Yeah.
This whole episode has really brought some deep societal divisions to the surface.
You mean like the protests and all that?
That's part of it, but it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about the fundamental questions this whole thing has raised.
Like what?
How much power should the president have? What are the limits of free speech? How do you even define what a threat to national security is? These are big, complex issues, and they're not going away anytime soon.
It's like this whole martial law thing just poured gasoline on a fire that was already smoldering.
A very apt analogy, and it's going to take a lot more than just a court decision to put that fire out.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this one question. What's it going to take for South Korea to heal?
It's a tough one. Can they bridge this political divide? Can they reaffirm their commitment to democracy after all this? I honestly don't know.
It makes you wonder if South Korea, a country with a relatively young democracy, can stumble like this. What does that say about the state of democracy around the world?
It's a sobering thought, no doubt about it. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that democracy is not a spectator sport. It's something we all have to actively participate in.
We can't just sit on the sidelines and expect it to work.
Exactly. We need to stay informed, we need to hold our leaders accountable, and we need to be willing to have those tough conversations even when we disagree.
Because at the end of the day, democracy is fragile,
More fragile than we think.
and it's up to all of us to protect it.
So there you have it. From a shocking martial law declaration to impeachment and a nation grappling with its identity, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into South Korean politics.
Thanks for sticking with us, folks. It's been quite a ride. But as always, the most important part of any journey is what we learn along the way.
And hopefully, this deep dive has given you some food for thought about the challenges facing South Korea and about the importance of protecting democratic values wherever they may be.